Next, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Drew Endy. He is sort of the ideal mixture of what we've been looking for in people in science for policy. On the one hand, he's a professor of bioengineering at Stanford. He's built up bioengineering degrees at MIT and at Stanford. And then on the other hand, he's a science policy fellow at the Hoover Institute with a sort of very sharp focus on what the role of biopolicy is in the US, worldwide. He's been on all sorts of panels as well. He really combines this sort of concern for the science on the one hand and how we can develop the policy on the other. Interestingly as well, as maybe some of you know, he started off the global genetic engineering Olympics for students as well, and I believe several Caltech teams have participated in that, so that's exciting as well. Drew Endy, very glad to have you here kicking off our biopolicy initiative. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much. There's never been a more important time for scientists to work with social scientists and policymakers. It's impossible for me to overstate that. And biopolicy in particular, for the reasons we heard from Dr. Max and Mary, is so incredibly important right now for reasons I'll try and get into. I'm grateful to be here. I'll get into it in a second. Mary, I also want to thank you. You are a powerful superhero in this space and an inspiration. And when I look at the photos that you share, what it reminds me of is oftentimes in rooms with policymakers and decision makers, there will be no biology in the room were it not for you. And I think that's still more true than we would like. There's a lot of important decisions that need to get made, and biology has become more important more quickly than people get old and retire. And so we have to figure out, one of the ways we think about it is we have to figure out how to help the prebiotics become probiotic. Right, but in any case, Mary, I'm really grateful to have known you and been inspired by your powerful work over the years. I'm happy to talk about the work face, the tactics of policy, what's going on with NIST, what's going on with Brussels, but I thought for this talk I would tread into deeper water and share some of the trickier puzzles that frame what I encounter in biopolicy. So I want to start with a story. These are two uncontrolled experiments named Sam and Max. And 4 years ago, Max came back from 3rd grade and in the kitchen, without any prompting, told his mother and I that GMOs are evil. And we didn't know where that came from. That was something he had learned in public school in Palo Alto. And we looked at each other and said, don't say anything. Right? Like, don't lock in that opposition between child and parent. And we thought that would buy us some time. They really loved dinosaurs, and so they got into Jurassic World, and this latest edition of Jurassic World had a multinational company that was evil, and the name of the company was BioSyn, synthetic biology transposed. And the CEO of the company looks like Tim Cook and I had a kid somehow. And so now, you know, like, Dad's evil, right? What do we do about this? Where did this come from? How do we navigate this? Here's a friend and colleague who I teach with on occasion now, Ahmed Best, and he was visiting campus a number of years ago, and we had just gotten in these seeds that had been shipped by FedEx from Russia. They were tobacco plants that had been bioengineered to emit a little bit of light. They're just barely bioluminescent. And Ahmed was visiting, we went to the greenhouse to take a look at them. He was so excited. His view of synthetic biology was the opposite of what I had experienced in my house. He was excited because synthesis to him meant composition. It meant performing arts, it meant music and dance and so on. And he wanted a biosynth. He wanted somebody to enable him to make biology so he could be a creative artist with biology. Ahmed played Jar Jar in the Star Wars prequels, and then was a Master Jedi in Mandalorian. Spoiler alert, episode 20 saves Baby Yoda. So this was interesting. So one day, I brought home some of these bioluminescent plants and gave them to Sam and Max. They're from a company now called Light Bio. And I said, guys, these are your night lights. You don't plug them in, there's no batteries, you have to water them, you have to give them sunlight. And they say, okay. their older cousins came for a visit, and they went in the bathroom, and they closed the door and turned out the light, so their retina is dark adapt, and they came out 5 minutes later, cool. The plants had changed their opinion of GMOs because they were cool. In 2022, the government had a policy change. The GMO labeling of food went away, and in the United States, the labeling of food turned into this, bioengineering. I'm not sure the people who did this talked to any bioengineers. I remember having a faculty meeting, and we were all very concerned that now suddenly we were going to get blamed for everything bad. Does changing the labels of food make the underlying cultural currents around biotechnology disappear? Obviously not. So for example, here's a smoothie I bought in the cafe next to the bioengineering building on campus. Normal, normal, normal labels. I want you to look at the far right label. No GMO. I can kind of maneuver around that. Like, modified sounds scary, I want an engineered thing. But the fine print, if a bioengineered version of it, we don't use it. Oh, like I'm supposed to be a bioengineer, so I can't duck on that. How do I think about this? Where does this come from? I've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm still navigating it. I just want to share with you the depths of where this goes. My wife is afraid of spiders. I don't know why. It's an instinctive fear. It's quite powerful. I am afraid of falling from heights. I don't know why. It's an instinctive fear. It's quite powerful. What if some people are afraid of technology? Instinctively. What if some people are afraid of biotechnology, in particular, instinctively? Bioscarer, if you will. Could that be a thing? How would we confront it? Well, one thing we could try is we could argue with people who are instinctively afraid of something by declaring that it's useful. Here's a letter signed by 159 Nobel laureates from 2016 talking about the importance of precision agriculture, GMO food, and in particular golden rice to help deal with vitamin A deficiency. Look at the last sentence of this letter. How many poor people in the world must die before we consider this, opposition to GMO, a crime against humanity? Now that's a profoundly powerful statement. You're arguing utility in a context of opposition. Some of that opposition might be irrational or political, but some of it might be instinctive fear, which is different. What's going to win? An argument based on utility or instinctive fear? Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. What's the fear represented in this work of literature? Many different types of fear. One version of the fear for me is the fear of being a bad parent. The fear of failing as a parent, whether a creation, a construction, a technology, or a child. What's going to win? Fear or an argument? Fear is always going to win. My plane diverted from Burbank to Ontario today. That was scary for somebody who's afraid of falling from heights. So what to do about this? What's going on here? What are these rabbits doing? Who has taught them to do what they're doing? There's a book called Homo Ludens by Johann Huizinga from almost 100 years ago. And he talks about play predating culture. And nobody teaches the animals to play. We learn, though, through playing. What do I mean by this? Drawing on the work of Donna Haraway and others, consider puppies. What are these puppies doing? Well, they're working with a very powerful technology. Their jaws. And they're biting each other. But it's a bite that they learn is not a real bite. I'm going to bite you, but I'm not going to bite you. what's underneath this simple activity of play? Honesty, responsibility, trustworthiness. I'm going to bite you, but I'm not going to bite you. You can trust me. They're working with something dangerous, quite literally. Have we learned to play with biotechnology yet? Do we have a culture of biotechnology, or have we gone immediately to utility? Because it's so important with all the important things biology and biotechnology can do. I'm suspicious that we've leaped to utility for the last half century and we're backfilling a culture of play. What does this look like? As one example, Christina Agapakis and Cecil Talas, a perfumer and microbiologist at Harvard, played with the microbes on the human skin by inoculating goat milk to make cheese. Sampling the microbes from the colleagues they have on the Harvard campus. So what is a cheese like with goat milk seeded with a microbe from a philosopher's toe, or from Daisy's armpit, and so on? We didn't eat any of these cheeses when they were made because we hadn't thought about biosafety, or we had thought that we hadn't thought about it, so it'd be better not to eat it. But we did smell them. And you have to invent new language for the philosopher toe microbe cheese. But the armpit cheese was citrus florobouquet. It's very interesting. It changed how I think about my relationship with living systems. My mom said, treat my body as a temple, you are what you eat. This suggested we eat what we are, that there's some relationship between our skin microbiome and the food that we eat. Is this a type of culture being backfilled or play? The work of David Kong at the Media Lab, the same sort of idea, DJ Jazzy Jeff, sampling microbes from the skin and inoculating a 12-inch platter, a petri dish, to make a record that you could then use optical processing to turn that into music, biotic beats or biota beats. Very accessible for students of all ages to play with biology in this way. How far could we take this in different ways? The work of Dr. Callie Chappell, she has mutated the word library by changing the first letter I into a letter A, inventing a new word, the library, and therefore a new profession, the librarian. And so imagine what happened from 1890 to 1928 when the Carnegie Endowment deployed money to build 2,800 public libraries throughout the United States in service of citizenship and literacy. Could we rerun that playbook in terms of citizenship and engagement with the natural sciences? The answer is yes, we could, and there's a legacy-defining opportunity for somebody there. When I think about this more deeply, I draw upon the tool from Stuart Brand, which is called pace layers. It's not a law of the universe, it's just a heuristic device. Stuart used this as a way of thinking about what's going on in the context of society and civilization. A healthy civilization, the way I think about it, is a stack of wooden blocks in 6 layers. Nature, culture, governance, infrastructure, commerce, fashion. And if things are working, the blocks are aligned and the tower stands up. But it's called pace layers because the pace of change is different. The pace quickens the faster you go up. So fashion at the top is fleeting. Culture is slow to change. Take a complicated puzzle like the pandemic. Where is the pandemic in the pace layers? And you quickly find you can spread it out across the layers, and it's in all the layers. The coronaviruses are in nature. Do I wear a mask or not? That's some combination of culture and fashion. How's my public health infrastructure? And so on. Who's selling what? Right? You can take any complicated problem where things aren't working quite right in society and spread it out across this and get a sense of where did things get out of alignment, right? In the United States, one of the puzzles I ran into when I go to DC, building on Mary's pioneering work with the bioeconomy blueprint, is what makes it American, right? And so I can put the bioeconomy in the commerce layer, and I can talk about industry and the infrastructure supporting the industry, biomanufacturing, the biofoundries, the bioworks. I can talk about what people are benefiting and enjoying from all of this. But is an American bioeconomy different than a French or German or Brazilian or Portuguese or Chinese or Japanese? But is the only thing that's unique about our bioeconomy is the zip code? Where the factories are, where the jobs are, is about something else? So just to play it out, we know biology and biotechnology about life, food and medicine and materials we need to live. But American bioeconomy, would also be about liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Who gets to do it where, for what purpose? That's down in the culture layer. And so if we want to make an American bioeconomy, we'd have to do things across all the layers. We'd have to accelerate infrastructure, we'd have to have a cultural space in place to talk about the policies of biology, we'd have to have experiences, we'd have to create joy up in the fashion layer, and so on. Biology is a cultural domain, Act 1. Let's go to Act 2. Here's a photograph I took in November 2016 in Geneva. This is the headquarters of the World Health Organization. I was there for a meeting of the Smallpox Committee, the committee that oversees research with live smallpox in Russia and the United States. At the entranceway, you can see an inset photo here of the statue honoring the vaccine campaign that eradicated the scourge of smallpox in the late 20th century. A colleague on the committee at the time, David Evans, gave an unscheduled presentation one morning and shared with us that he had built in his laboratory in Alberta, Canada, a pox virus from scratch. He had been motivated to do this to develop better vaccines against pox virus, including things like mpox, but it was quite a shock to the committee because we were struggling to navigate how should we govern research with smallpox, including whether or not we should eradicate the remaining live stocks of the virus in the labs in a world where people might be able to build the virus from scratch. And so by showing up and giving this presentation, he had proven by experiment a very policy relevant finding that in fact you could build a pox virus from scratch. At the end of that presentation, to a first approximation, he dropped the microphone and exhorted the room in a constructive way to deal with this new reality. Now that was in 2016, and I think we're still struggling to navigate this reality of how do we manage risks when people can do more with biology. If I stick with pox for a second, right, now we're talking about biology as a political domain. It's a problem when people get infected. These are people being pulled away forcibly into isolation wards because they have the pox. This is what an anti-vaccine campaign looks like in the 19th century. What's old and new, it's not brand new. This is what a 1930 cartoon looks like, relevant to anti-vaccination, misinformation, fake news, fake bio, you name it. This is a mural celebrating the smallpox eradication program in Ethiopia. Look at all the things implied on this piece of art that were needed in order to enable people to work together cooperatively to get rid of this scourge through a vaccine campaign. How did we forget all of this, by the way, seemingly in 2019 and 2020 and 2021? Now, of course, it's not just pox. When we think about risks in biology, we have coronavirus, we have flu. Those are Stanford undergraduates wearing masks in 1918. And so on. All of these perceptions around the politics of the emergence of biotechnology are, in my experience, gated by fear of biotechnology from a policymaker level. I've had, for example, retired speakers of the House come to me. They don't use this exact language, but here's what they're communicating. Look, man, there's a briefing from the intelligence agencies that comes around the Congress, and it creates absolute existential paralysis around your stuff. Right? It's not like the AI briefing. The AI briefing raises concerns, but at the end of the day, it triggers competitive juices, and the Congress just goes, win! But the biology briefing causes existential paralysis. This is all in a context where the world is changing. So here's a preprint from last month from a good colleague at Stanford, Brian He and Sam King, a third-year PhD student, where they've trained a large language model on DNA sequences and then used that when you prompt it to emit the genomes of bacterial viruses, or phage. Sam was able to build 300 of these genomes and test them experimentally, and 16 of them were viable. And you can see the op-ed in the Washington Post that soon followed. AI just created a working virus. The United States is not prepared for that. The problem with this headline that I have is that's not right. Sam created the virus. It wasn't AI. Sam made it. And the other part of the headline is correct. We're not prepared for that. The neat thing about this work that gets hidden is Sam was able to build 300 virus genomes. one student in one experiment. Right? I know important work is happening at Caltech on this. Right? When I was starting my lab, we struggled and spent the entire budget of our lab to build a quarter of a genome of one bacterial virus, and could just barely do that. Sam, in one experiment, is building 300. Oh, by the way, if you're worried about large language models in AI and bio, yeah, it's one thing to build a virus genome. Check out the foundation model that got pre-printed for snail toxins. Among the most potent toxins we've got, very powerful interventions, but I don't know that I would have done that. I don't know that that was a good idea to pre-print that work. Biotechnology is changing in different ways too. There is so much upside and positive opportunity around biotechnology, whether it's economic or biodiversity or you name it, that the people coming after us instinctively know it. When we had trouble gaining support from the United States government to advance synthetic biology 25 years ago, the people who came to our rescue as colleagues were the teenagers matriculating to the universities. They could understand what was happening and because they're from the future, right? And so that's what this turns into. This is the Genetic Engineering Olympics known as iGEM. If you'd like to visit in Paris, it's happening at the end of the month, and please let me know, and I'd be happy to host you. 5,000 20-year-olds approximately, including from Pasadena, but also 2,500 from China. This is one of the larger emerging biotechnology educational platforms globally, including in China. So where does this end up, and how does this navigate the politics of fear? This is a photograph of the gentleman who made the first computer virus that was released outside of a laboratory setting. That's when he was in college. He actually did it when he was a high school student, top left, in Pittsburgh, back in the 1980s, the elk cloner malware virus. And then Bunny Huang is one of the most beautiful engineers I've ever met. He's a hardware hacker. He was the person who reverse engineered the Xbox back in the day with Tom Knight and colleagues at MIT. When flu came out, right, and you were having those meetings, he was looking at the sequence and asking questions like, this virus is quite fascinating. How many bits does it take to kill a human? And what changes might be needed to do this? Right, now back then, very few people expected Bunny would go make this. I certainly didn't. That's not who he is. But something has changed in the last 15, 20 years. Building viruses from scratch has become routine. We have not updated our policy frameworks to navigate this change, in my opinion. There's other things that give pause. 75 years ago, last month, the United States government apparently ran a program where they converted one boat off the coast of San Francisco to disperse a microbe into the fog to answer the question, could you infect everybody in San Francisco with the microorganism? And the answer turns out to be yes. The microbe comes in the fog, and you can collect it on Petri dishes, and you use a safe microbe that doesn't cause disease. It makes red spots. Operation Sea Spray. One of the books that weighs heavy on me when I think about risks in biology is written by Professor Marc Bloch, a historian, in 1940. He's struggling to understand what happened to France as the Nazis had overrun the nation. And he does an analysis from 1920 to 1940. What did we do? What decisions were we confronted with? What mistakes did we make by failing to make decisions? And the takeaway is there was a faction that could see how things were changing, but the whole nation was desperately tired coming out of the Great War and the flu pandemic of 1918 to 1921, and everybody wanted to get back to normal. And so they placed a bet and put all their faith, according to Professor Bloch, into concrete, into Maginot. Now that's not all of it, but that's some of it. Failing to navigate what's changing doesn't really help you if the world is changing. Leaders have to understand reality. Policymakers have to understand reality. People who understand reality have to help people understand reality. Because of this, the first product we've shipped, I don't wake up in the morning consumed with pessimism. I'm actually really optimistic about what biotechnology can deliver. But because operational fear of biology as a security domain is so paralyzing, we've put out a first product called Biosecurity Really. And it's inspired by Professor Bloch's work so that none of us have to write strange defeat D in 2040. The way this study went down was we looked at all the trends that we could see in emerging biotechnology and the world that contribute in ways that might make biosecurity risks worse. Just get them all out in the open, create a pit of despair and challenge. And then ask, how can we climb out of this? Can we climb out of it? Neutral view, but could we do it? One of the key insights is we have to use biology to secure biology. You can't secure biology using only other things. You need to use software to secure software. We're going to need to use wetware to secure wetware. We also went a little bit too far in our thinking. How far would you be willing to go to secure biology? Would you, for example, be willing to consider a human artificial chromosome that expresses things that inhibit infections, such that you would have that implanted through an IVF process and have a product called biosecurity at birth, or BABY, B-A-B? Right? Sounds kind of clever, but maybe we're not ready for that. And so when we were evaluating these things, we came up with our own application of something. Maybe many here have heard of technology readiness levels, from an idea to a ready-to-deploy technology, TRLs. We came up with what we call society readiness levels. Is society ready for this potential technology? And it's not all positive. So the SRL scale goes from not 1 to 9, but -2 to 2. -2 meaning, no way, widespread opposition, right? Antibiotics would be 2 usually, right? Vaccines might be 1 to 2, but something like a germline edit or whatnot be a -2. Okay. And then we take a swing at what to do about it, and we come up with 9 sets of policy recommendations. Because this report's live as of last week, I don't want to spend time here on it, but just to give you a sense of it. There are key scientific questions in a lot of these policy recommendations, right? So one of the recommendations, for example, 8, around indoor air quality is, let's treat air quality like we treat water quality. Move to an absolute infectious agent count standard. But there needs to be is the juice worth the squeeze economic analysis, public health benefit analysis. Biology is a political domain. It's all over the place. It's getting more intense. Last one, biology as a strategic domain. This slide may work better in Texas than Pasadena, but about 10 years ago, Georgia wanted to have a good college football team. And so they got Smart, Coach Smart, who was of Georgia but had been coaching, I think, the defensive coordinator at Alabama. And so Coach Smart's been on a tear in Georgia, and they've won several national championships over the last decade. What does it mean to get smart about biology as a strategic domain? There's a cliche about traveling internationally, which is you travel not to see the world, but to understand where you're from. So I want to go to Beijing to help us think about how we think about biology as a strategic domain. And I want to start with some of the general writing and work from President Xi. These are his thoughts around medium to long-term development goals. Number 1, expand the domestic economy. Let's get to complete domestic circulation of our economy and be the factory for the world. No surprise. Number 2, we've got to stabilize our industrial supply chains. Import substitution, so domestically we're in good shape, and if we create leverage by implementing dependencies for others, fine, we'll take that leverage. Not surprising. Improve the mix of scientific and technical inputs and outputs, and then a particular focus on marrying basic research in the life sciences with research in information technology. He's on a roll. Ensure harmony between humans and nature. Respect nature. Protect it. Build an eco-civilization that's vital. Pursuit of economic and social progress must be based on harmony between human and nature. Public health. Develop a bottom-up system that ensures early detection, warning, and response to control diseases as they arise. I'm looking at this, go check, 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 check. Looks pretty good to me. More recently, here's an example of what we could see, a speech from this year. Our goal is to be a world leader in science and technology. It's important. And we only have a decade to become the powerhouse of science and technology. Paraphrasing. Here's an interpretation from an Australian colleague about what's happening in Beijing and what the US thinks is happening in Beijing, specific to biotechnology. The US does not understand how China thinks about biotechnology. The United States thinks China thinks about biotechnology like the United States does, one in a long list of technologies. We have fought over and again for the last 20 years to get biotechnology on a list of being important. And sometimes it's there and sometimes it goes away. That's crazy. Meanwhile, according to this analysis, biotechnology in China is the technology. Not a technology, the. Why might that be? Biology as material operates at the intersection of joules, bits, and atoms. Energy, information, and stuff. Reality operates at the intersection of joules, bits, and atoms. China has done amazing work with energy generation, and they need to operationally master living matter to handle the stuff on a sustainable basis. That's my net assessment. We could also note that relative to the United States, China's population is about 4 times the US, and the farmland's about 3/4. So food security might cut a little bit differently if you're the agricultural minister in Beijing compared to here. Right side in red. The most recent work report listed only 4 technologies to receive more money in this year. Biomanufacturing is number 1. We can learn a lot by traveling the world. Here's a colleague from Shenzhen, Chenli Liu. I had not seen Chenli since 2019 when he visited Stanford. We had dinner at the house and walked around the campus till it got dark. It's hard for me to go to Shenzhen right now. It's hard for him to come here. So we were both in Europe and we decided to have lunch a few weeks ago. This is what it looks like when I come off a red eye and I'm sitting in the middle seat in the back of the plane with 20-year-olds who have never been to France before. So they're so excited to be flying to Charles de Gaulle. Hey Chenli, how's it going? Great to see you. I'm doing good. I'm the president of the Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology. Apparently, that's the #1 institute in the Chinese Academy of Sciences. I'm working on emerging biotechnologies and other things. How do you know you're #1? Well, that's because of high impact papers and startups coming out and so on. How big's your team? I have 2,500 staff. I have 2,500 students and postdocs. I'm trying to get money to onboard a second PhD student this year. All right. Wow, congratulations. It's exciting, like all credit. In a period of 6 years, they have manifested what I would consider to be a national laboratory for one of the core technologies of the 21st century. All credit due. This is one of the buildings on the campus of the Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology with the biofabs and the this and that. And there's nothing else like it. These are the large language laboratories that go with the large language models and so on. Now let's come back to the United States. We've been on a tear for almost a century around science and engineering. And it predates World War II, but it's captured nicely in what comes out of World War II in Vannevar Bush's Endless Frontier. The National Academies holds this up with love and respect, but I am suspicious that many members of the academies have not read it. Because if they had read it, they'd know that we might be in a little bit of trouble. And so I want to walk through this because I think there's a profound foundational issue we've got to grapple with together in the United States and with our colleagues abroad. So let's take a look. How does this come about? President Roosevelt writes a letter to Vannevar and says, I need you to figure out how to recommend what we should be doing in science coming out of the war. Roosevelt dies. And so the response goes to President Truman. And here's what it says, but I'm going to highlight the executive summary. We need science in order to advance the war against disease. We need science to create innovations, new industries, bigger economies, all that stuff. And we need science to defend against aggression, new and improved weapons. That's basically it. The puzzle for the scientist is, The genius here from Bush is science is actually an endless frontier. So if you're marketing this to scientists just from the title alone, like, yeah, you answer one question, you get more questions. Feels good if you're a scientist. But that's not the audience for this thing. The audience is the president, and then the people who are not scientists supporting the president. How did we get to this? So I want to go back before the war. Here are some explosions being set off on the dirt of Louisiana in the 1930s by a company, Geophysical Service Incorporated, pushing energy into the ground, capturing the reflections and guiding where to drill for oil. Here's the same company operating a field in Saudi Arabia, helping to find the oil fields over there. When World War II breaks out, they have to pull back all their oil discovery crews, and they're about to go out of business till they get a contract from the Navy to find German U-boats by looking at things under the surface of the Atlantic waves. This saves the company. Coming out of the war with the germanium crystal production out of Bell Labs and the licensing of that, the company renames, becomes Texas Instruments. They learn how to make silicon transistors. As a world first, they go public. They recruit Jack Kilby from Wisconsin, and within 100 days of being at Texas Instruments, Jack's made the integrated circuit. All right. So this feeds right into what we hear from Bush back to Truman and this endless frontier. It makes sense. It got us on a roll. But I want to pick at some of the things that arise since then that put some of this at more than a little bit of risk and might contribute to what we're experiencing today. I never met Milton, but I've started to read his books. One of the fun things about spending time outside of the lab is I get to learn about a lot of things I've never learned before. So here's one of his famous books written in 1962, Capitalism and Freedom. And if you've never read it before, it's amazing. Check out this opening text. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Sounds good. I grew up with that. Then he goes on to write, neither half of this statement expresses a relationship between the citizen and his government that is worthy of the ideals of free men in a free society. What? I thought these were holy words from Kennedy. Not to Milton. The paternalistic, what your country can do for you, implies the government is the patron, the citizen, the ward, a view that is at odds with the free man's belief in his own responsibility for his own destiny. The organismic, what you can do for your country, implies the government is the master or the deity, the citizen, the servant. He doesn't like it. So that landed in 1962. Just want you to remember that. We're now in this endless frontier era, but something just got laid down. This wasn't a widespread position at the time. We'll come back and read what Milton had to write on the 40th anniversary of his book in a second. 1989, Berlin Wall falls. Cold War winding down. Remember one of those three justifications for public investment in science? Existential Hobbesian war. I got a little scene from the film Oppenheimer. I cannot stand the movie Oppenheimer because it reminds me that our nation built national labs from scratch on the regular, and we don't do that right now. So it's very painful for me to watch Oppenheimer, but there's one scene in the movie that's profoundly impactful to do with this topic we're discussing. See if the audio works.
If they detonated too high in the air, the blast wouldn't be as powerful.
With respect, Dr. Oppenheimer, we'll take it from here.
Did Truman brief Stalin at Potsdam?
A brief would be
An overstatement. He referred to a powerful new weapon. Stalin hoped we'd use it against Japan.
That's it.
Robert, we've given them an ace. It's for them to play the hand.
You ready for the sixth?
It's up to the CO in the Pacific.
Should I come with you to Washington?
What for?
Should I come to Washington? What for? Says the general. Should I come to Washington, says the scientist. What for? We'll take it from here, Dr. Oppenheimer, just after the successful test of the bomb. Now, this is a dramatic representation, but it cuts to a point. Who has power? Who wants power? In the context of biology as a strategic domain. Maybe we began to lose something when the wall fell and we didn't totally understand what we were losing. Maybe we started to lose more when the Office of Technology Assessment went away, and so on and so on and so forth. Okay, meanwhile, we still got war on disease, right? 15 years ago or so, a colleague at Stanford published a paper. Most published research findings are false in PLOS Medicine, right in the middle of war on disease. Nature, a couple years later, publishes a survey. Hey, you scientists, can you repeat the work published by other scientists? Doesn't look great. Now, some of this is problematic because it's so superficial. I remember when our lab tried to repeat the work of Professor Elowitz by implementing a repressilator. And it took us 18 months because we had to learn how to do the agarose film monolayer microscopy that was quite an art that Michael had pioneered. And so there's a superficial falseness in this, but that's not the point. These artifacts are landing politically, right? Whether as a scientific community we might dismiss them. It gets worse. Where did SARS-CoV-2 come from? It used to be that there was no ambiguity about where viruses came from. They came from nature because we couldn't build viruses. That changed in the last decade. Building viruses is now routine. We haven't changed our policies. A historian colleague at Stanford, Professor Kakin, an expert on Stalin, caught me in the hallway a couple months ago, and he blurts out, "Hey, Drew, Endless Frontier's dead. Come up with something new." What? What? I've lived my entire life under the umbrella of the Endless Frontier. How could it be dead? Is he right? Maybe he's 80% right. He can't be 100% right. Do I really have to figure this out? Do we have to figure this out? We do have to figure this out. Just to cut to the punchline, we have to figure it out in a context where, in biology in particular, things are moving. The work we do on a policy and strategy side is to look at the trends and to try and abstract them so we can get to dimensions of strategic leverage. In the future, you're going to design the DNA anywhere and download and grow. There's going to be a bionet for manufacturing resilience. Biology is a general purpose technology. It's not just food and medicine and materials, it's explosives. It's semiconductor materials. We think of biotechnology as being locked up. It's increasingly around us and on us and inside us. Some of the work being done here at Caltech on the policy of this is quite relevant. We think of biotechnology as being hard. We think you need laboratories and postdocs to build biological systems. How many postdocs were involved in building this building? I hope 0, because that would mean there was science to be done and experiments, and you wouldn't know if the building would fall over randomly, right? But bioengineering is actually going to become engineering, making it routine, design, build, work, not design, build, test, learn. The amazing things about the computational tools is they let us access the neobiotic, the biology we'll never see before. Hey, what if biotech's cool? What if people are citizens? So we've got to figure out this story we're telling, not to ourselves, but to others, about why science is important in a space that's hyper-dynamic. And I think of it as like 1975 computing, poised to become very, very different. So let's go back to Milton Friedman for a second. I have the benefit of studying him as a student when I'm old, and so I get to read what he writes on the 40th anniversary of his book, whereas most of my colleagues in economics and history, they studied him as undergrad, so they never see the preface to the 40th anniversary edition. So I just want to highlight the last paragraph in this. What a privilege to evaluate my own work 40 years later. And let's just go to the red and blue text. If there's one change I'd like to make, it'd be to replace the dichotomy of economic and political freedom with the trichotomy of economic, civil, and political freedom. He's reflecting on Hong Kong. And then later in blue, the one major defect in my book seems to me an inadequate treatment of the role of political freedom. Oh, that seems important. Let me restate it. Here's a book that I didn't know about, I just learned about a few months ago. Why Capitalism Will Not Bring Democracy to China. Linking that back to Milton, free markets don't guarantee free people. I wish somebody told me that like 20 years ago. Let me wrap up with a few slides. We all know this famous scene. I don't want to make light of it, but I want to try and get to a point. The speech here is not, I have a large language model. The speech is not, I have a startup or an invention or an executive order. Reverend King's speech is about having a dream. This is extraordinarily difficult, depending on what type of dream you're going for. You want to take the easy way out, you bring forward a nightmare. Because you can get attention by broadcasting a nightmare, and off you go. When Vice President Gore put forward an inconvenient truth, he made a rhetorical design choice to tell a story about climate, which was, stuff's going to get bad. Now, physically, he might be correct, but there's a narrative structure there. It's easier to get that message out. The hidden cost of a negative dream is you will not get sufficient collective action until enough people believe the nightmare's real. A positive dream comes with a different set of challenges. It's much harder to bring forward to begin with, and then if you're proposing anything that's actual change, it's risky. The doing of this requires courage, and so I'd encourage you to track down the story of Mahalia Jackson, a gospel singer who helped inspire, apparently, Reverend King in the giving of his speech, encouraging him to tell people about his dream. Extraordinary position in the video where you can see about 9 minutes into the recording of the speech, he sets his prepared notes aside after apparently hearing from Mahalia Jackson encouraging him as such. I want to share with you a different speech, just a snippet of it, from a Caltech colleague we've heard about, that I consider to be profoundly important and maybe not as widely appreciated as it should be. This is at the establishment of President Biden's Office of Science Technology Policy and Professor Arnold. Listen to how she's framing the importance of science and compare and contrast it with Vannevar Bush.
Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, I am humbled and honored by this chance to serve the American people. At this moment of profound grief, but unprecedented opportunity. As an engineer by training, there's a certain temptation to see the work ahead of us as a series of difficult problems to be solved. But the truth is, that's not what drew me to this role. Like the rest of this extraordinary team, I'm here today because of love. A love of science, yes, but also a deeper love of our planet and of our people, without whom science has no purpose or meaning.
Is she talking about war? Is she talking about war on disease? Is she talking about economic innovation and opportunity? Very different. This is a profound speech. Who is she talking to? It's in the frame. She's talking to the president. She's also talking to us. I don't have an answer to Professor Kotkin's task. The endless frontier is dead, come up with something new. But it's some of the good work underneath all of biopolicy I think we have to wrestle and engage with. And I think what Professor Arnold offers up is a fine point of departure. 2 more slides. There are many dreams out there. They come in all sorts of different sizes and flavors. Singapore, as one example, wants to get to the year 2050 carbon neutral and keep 20% of GDP onshore manufacturing. Those 2 goals are in opposition. If you do more manufacturing, you're going to emit more carbon. They own the 3rd largest depending on how you count, petroleum refining location on Earth, Jurong Island, a synthetic island. 2050 is less than 9,000 days from now. It's less than 8,900 days from now. I update that number on my whiteboard in my office because we think of 2050 as being impossibly far away. It's not. We're on the clock. Imagine all the things that have to be made true here by 2050 to get to net zero on carbon and keep manufacturing onshore as an issue of sovereignty. They're going to need a lot of biology. And because the capital depreciation schedule for refining equipment is at least 15 years, the biology is going to need to be made ready to go at scale by 2035, less than a decade from now. We have not a day to waste on that dream they have. Last slide. I really hope that part of the Lynn Center's work in biopolicy, in addition to being at the wave front of what needs to happen right now, is to struggle with this question of what are our dreams and aspirations in a positive sense for a world that is increasingly biotechnological or biotic. And just as one postcard to consider, as a long ago structural engineer, a suspension bridge from the far east-northeast corner of India, grown from the roots of a rubber plant, fixing carbon as it grows, getting stronger, passed down from one generation to the next. We live on a planet with over 100 terawatts of photosynthesis, harvesting energy, used to move materials around. That's plenty. We can complement that with other forms of primary energy production that are sustainable, starting with solar. We can move from primary to embodied energy with a shunt, from electricity into storing information and energy in organic molecules. The physics of flourishing on this planet are quite good, and in a modern sense, obtainable for the first time in human history. We just have to get along with it. So we can debate and figure out the facts, what I'm saying just now, but for all of us, what do we do with that? What is the dream? Do we share dreams together, positive dreams, in partnership with biology? So that's a taste of how we're thinking about underneath the surface. Biology is a cultural domain, biology is a political domain, and biology is a strategic domain. Grateful for your invitation and looking forward to questions in the reception. Thank you very much.